Have you ever heard of a victory that actually started with what looked like a complete and utter defeat? Well, today we're going to dive into one of the most incredible strategic pivots in all of history. It's a moment where a community, right on the brink of being wiped out, chose a path that looked like surrender, but ended up being its greatest triumph.
The whole story really kicks off with this one single massive number, 10,000. Now, this wasn't just any army. It was a huge coalition of different tribes, all brought together with one single devastating goal in mind. And what was that goal? To march on the city of Medina and to completely, totally annihilate the young Muslim community. This was way more than just a battle. It was a fight for their very survival. And who was standing in the way of that 10,000-strong army? Just 3,000 defenders. The odds weren't just bad, they were, basically impossible. So, facing this overwhelming force, they knew that a conventional, head-on battle out in the open was just not going to happen. It would have been a slaughter. So instead, they went for something completely out of left field, a strategy that would change everything before the real battle even began.
All right, so this brings us to the first chapter of this incredible story, the Impossible Siege, an event that would later be known as the Battle of the Trench.
So in the 5th year of the Islamic calendar, that massive Confederate army shows up ready to lay siege to the city. They were probably expecting a quick fight, crush the Muslims and be done with it. But they were about to run into a tactic that no one in Arabia had ever really seen before.
This was the radical idea. Following the advice of a companion named Salman the Persian, the defenders took on this monumental project. For 20 straight days, the entire community, all 3,000 of them, worked day and night to dig this massive trench around the city's most vulnerable side. So when the attacking army finally arrived, their greatest strength, their cavalry, was totally useless. They were just stuck and completely baffled.
But the siege just dragged on for nearly a month. Imagine it. Food is running out, the weather gets terrible, and the psychological pressure is just immense. This verse from the Quran really captures that feeling of pure terror and desperation, a moment where everyone's faith was being tested to its absolute breaking point. In the end, though, the attacking army, just frustrated, cold, and beaten down by the elements, simply packed up and left. It was a victory for sure, but a defensive one. The root of the conflict was still there.
And this is where the story takes a really sharp and unexpected turn. The very next year, instead of gearing up for another war, Prophet Muhammad leads his followers toward Mecca for a peaceful pilgrimage. And what comes out of it isn't another battle, but a peace treaty that was, let's just say, deeply controversial.
Okay, just take a second to really look at these terms, because on the surface they seem incredibly one-sided. First, the Muslims have to turn back right now without even visiting the Holy Kaaba. They can come back next year, sure, but only for 3 days. And then look at these clauses about fugitives. If someone from Mecca escapes to the Muslims, they have to be sent back. But if a Muslim flees to Mecca, nope, they get to stay. And for all of these concessions, they get a 10-year truce. To a lot of his followers, this felt like an absolute, humiliating surrender.
And that is the million-dollar question, isn't it? Was this a leader backed into a corner, just taking what he could get to avoid another fight? Or was there something much, much bigger going on here?
This brings us to the real heart of our story today, the hidden victory. Because the true result of this treaty, well, it wasn't obvious at first, but it would go on to fundamentally change the future of the entire region.
Despite all the frustration and confusion from his own people, the prophet understood something that they couldn't see just yet. History would actually come to call this apparent surrender the clear victory. So the question is, why?
So here's where the strategic genius really shines through. What did those harsh terms actually buy? Something far more valuable than pride, 10 years of guaranteed peace. This truce completely changed the whole vibe. The state of constant warfare was over. And for the very first time, people from all these different tribes could actually interact with the Muslims freely, without fear. They could talk, they could trade, and they could finally see for themselves what this new community was really all about.
So, just like that, the entire dynamic shifted. The fight moved away from the battlefield and into the world of ideas and conversation.
So instead of defending a physical trench, the Muslims now had the space and the peace to just talk to people and explain their faith. The source material makes it clear. Once people could interact peacefully, all those old hatreds and misconceptions just started to melt away. And get this, in the 2 years following this treaty, More people converted to Islam than in all the previous years of conflict combined. It wasn't even close.
This new era of peace and stability wasn't just about internal growth either. It created the security they needed to finally look beyond their own borders and engage with the wider world on a scale they had never even dreamed of before.
I mean, this timeline really lays it all out, doesn't it? The treaty is signed in year 6, and by the very next year, with things finally stable at home, the Prophet kicks off this incredibly bold new plan, sending out letters, not just to local tribes, but to the great emperors and kings of the known world.
And we are not talking about small-time chieftains here. No way. These were letters sent to the absolute superpowers of the 7th century. Heraclius, the Caesar of Rome, the ruler of the massive Persian Empire, the king of Egypt, and the king of Ethiopia. This was a move of incredible confidence, and it was only possible because of the strategic peace they had secured.
And so that brings us right back to our original question. How do you win by losing? The story of the trench in this treaty shows us that sometimes a true victory isn't about crushing your opponent in a head-on fight. Sometimes it's about changing the rules of the game entirely. It's about having the wisdom to see that a short-term sacrifice can open the door to a long-term strategic win that changes absolutely everything.